Okay.
Encourage people to.
Okay, we are recording.
All right, we'll get started. Good evening. I'm Kathy Weymouth, and I'm a member of the Holderness Free Library Friends Group. And we are excited this evening to have Alex Ray with us. Alex is a Holderness resident. He is the owner and founder of the Common Man family of restaurants. He is an actor. Many of us have seen him on stage. Maybe most noteworthy, I'm thinking now, is the number of charitable hours he has given to this state in relief efforts and beyond. And we thank you for that. And outside of the state and even outside of the country, Alex. Tonight, we're trying a different format. And I'm not even sure how this got set up, but Sid Lovett, also Holderness resident, minister, former New Hampshire state rep, has somehow gotten together with Alex and came up with this idea to generate some questions and answers for the next 50 minutes or so. So we will get started. This is being recorded, and we will record the entire program and be able to share it later. So we're going to get started and look at the uncommon side of Alex Ray. And Alex, thank you so much.
You're
welcome. Glad to be here.
It's Alex, you've been the founder of the Common Man restaurant over 50 years ago. And we need to go back a little bit and figure out how the heck you ever got into that as a young man growing up in Conway, New Hampshire, graduating from Kennett High School, and then taking off to learn something about cooking, and then to the Culinary Institute of America, which was in New Haven. Whatever got into you to get started in that direction?
We moved to Conway from New Jersey when I was 14 in 1959. And so I immediately got a summer job washing dishes in a restaurant called the Bantam Cock. That's my food start. So from there through high school, I worked at Cranmore Mountain Food Kitchen, and terrible student. It took me 5 years to get through high school at Kennett. And when I finally did, the principal, we were called a love-hate relationship. He said, "So Al, you're finally out of here. What do you want to be?" And I said, "Oh, an architect or a civil engineer, but I'm going to cooking school." Because that's all I could get. I was a loss at school, a failure, a complete nerd, just terrible. So then 2 years of cooking school.
You were one of the earliest members of that rather now famous Culinary Institute. You come to New Haven, they have an old estate at the head of Prospect Street. The back of the bakery was the wall of Joan, my wife's garden in New Haven. What did you do there?
At the school was 125. I was late, of course, getting there and applying, so I ended up in the second floor of the founder of the school, Frances B. Roth, a lady that founded CIA then. And I worked nights downtown in a restaurant. You might remember, you were a Yalie, George and Harry's on right across from the Woolsey Hall.
Street.
That was Wall Street. I worked there nights for the first year, and serving. I was 18, but I was serving kids 21 and carting them. That was kind of from St. Anthony's across the street in this little bar restaurant, Greek restaurant.
No, George and Harry's, very famous restaurant in New Haven.
I was putting up the food and the beers, and there was all Greek talk. I didn't know Greek. I only know 2 words. Faristo is thank you, and skata is a word you got to figure out yourselves.
So after finishing Culinary Institute, what happened? You came back to this area?
I finished in the 2-year school. I finished and I said, I will never work in a restaurant again. I had a better idea. I wanted to work in institutional feeding, which is hospitals, colleges, factories, because you work 8 to 5, 5 days a week. It's a real job instead of the restaurant game, which is tough. So that's what I did. I worked for a company called Canteen Corporation, kind of like Sodexo and Aramark and all that. And after a year and a half, they gave me my own restaurant in Nashua, New Hampshire. And in a year and a half, the guy said, "You won't be here in a year." And I said, "You're going to fire me?" And I was 21, I think. And he said, "I didn't say that." He said, "You won't be here in a year." I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" He said, "You're not corporate material." And I had no idea what he meant, but I do today. I wouldn't take any instructions from Chicago, the home office. I would tell them to get lost. So basically I quit after a year and a half and went doing other things, selling restaurant equipment and something else, I forget what it was. Oh, selling restaurant equipment.
What got you into Ashland to buy that brick building, the old brick house, which was next to Pacchetti's hardware
well,
store?
Yeah, when I lived in Litchfield, which is right near Nashua, my job first was up at Grenier Field, which is now the airport for Sanders Associates. And I wanted to open a place weekends, because I only work Monday through Friday, called the Auction Barn up in Thornton. We served beer and pizza. And it was before there was 93 up beyond Waterville. So I was kind of stupid, didn't think very far ahead. Went up to this guy's house and said, "Can I rent your barn?" He said, "How much you'll pay me?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Why would I do that?" And I said, "Because I'm going to put in a sewer and a well and insulate it. And I want to open a beer place." And it was named Alconky. And he said, "I'll tell you what, I'll give it to you for a year for free, and then we'll see what happens." So I put $3,500 into it. A friend of mine and myself, we opened it, and it was this huge success. It was called the Auction Barn because it was an auction barn, and I just insulated and put heat in. And of course, the well was a milk box in the brook with a pump on it. That was a well. And the septic system, a local guy with a backhoe, all in one day, he built it. You didn't have rules back then, so it was in the parking lot where you never put them. And we worked it till April 1st. That's 4 months. When it was over, I never went back, but it was very successful. It was we came up on Friday night. I put stickers in all the loon gondolas and stuff. And of course, they called me and give me hell. And I said, how can I control the people? I don't like put them in the gondolas. Said Auction Barn for pizza, you know. That's
Well, so
that story.
What got you to Ashland?
You know,
to
the
buy
next
the-
step was by June 23rd of 1969, I read the Sunday paper and I was selling restaurant equipment with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I wasn't home, or I was driving around New England. So I didn't quit, but I started looking in the paper. On Sunday, June 23rd, there was a place called Pine Shore. It was for rent. And that Sunday I drove up there, June 23rd, Sunday, looked at the place, called the guy in New York and said, "Well, how much you want for it?" And Mr. Heath across the street gave me the key to get in. And I said, "I'll take it." He said, $4,500 for the whole summer. And I said, "I'll take it." He said, "Well, you got to send me a check before noon on Monday." This was Sunday. And I had no money because I wasn't paid much for the sales job. You know, no expenses, no car, no nothing. I went up to Alex, the guy that knew me. I said, where will I get some money? He said, "See Ken Bartlett." So I went in and he said, "No, you can't, we won't loan you the money." I thought he knew me. And he said, "Come back after 1 o'clock. Well, I came back at 1 o'clock. But before that, I called the guy in New York at 11:45. I said, "I got the money," which I didn't have. He said, his name was Carlos Durand. He was a Cuban, and his wife and him got in a serious New York City, Bronx Avenue crash. So they couldn't open the place. So I got instantly, and when what's his name came, Ken and Bartlett came home from lunch, he pulled a check out of his pocket for $4,500 and handed it to me. And he said, my wife and I decided we'd loan you the money because the bank won't do it. Now that's old banking. End of the story.
What a wonderful friend he was to you. To
Yeah,
give you the
yeah.
lift.
And now you
Why
know
did-
Pine Shore. You know Pine Shore because you brought your dad there and you sat at the round table in the corner with the whole family.
We had children working for you who'd come back and regale us with stories of your management style. And that was how we got very much started on our friendship. But why did you, when you got to Ashland with the Common Man, how did you find the name Common Man?
Just sitting on the stoop and thinking about who the customers would be, everyone from a logger to Ken Bartlett. And I wanted to be real. 42 beats. I tried to borrow the money from Ken again, and he said, don't buy anything in Ashland. And so did MVSB. But again, Ken said, well, we'll take a look at it. And he said, I was asking $12,500 and he said, offer him 11, Ken. I went back, before you knew it, I owned the place. We lived on the second floor for 7 years with the kids while I made the restaurant downstairs in the winter.
Well, you had a lot of helping hands and so on. But now, having been one common man, and then it went into this expansion, which we'll get into. But let's talk about the later use of your reputation and your skills with what I guess we call the private public property or partnership. You have created 2 rest areas on Route 93 that sell numbers of millions of gallons of gas and all kinds of entertainment, including the state liquor stores. But you've learned from that how actually the state makes money having entered into a partnership with you some 40 years later. The Common Man is now really blossoming all over the state. How did you work that out?
Well, Sid, the second restaurant opened 15 years after Common Man Ashland in Lincoln. That was, I want to say, 1986, I think it was. 15 years I just stayed in Ashland. And then for some reason, I went further. It just kept going. I can't remember the order of them or anything, but it's not.
It sounds like
so now we have
addiction.
Yeah, it's an addiction. Yeah. Speaking of addictions, it could have been beer or wine, but today it's coffee. And
well, we'll talk about that transition later. But the fact is that you've taught the state how it can work with private enterprise to make a much more successful public presence.
Still trying to do that.
Well, let's move on to the question of the addiction issue. You used to make fun of the issues that people had with addictions. And then all of a sudden you went through a transformation, which was quite remarkable. And I would say uncommon. When you ask people on the street, what do they say?
Well, I never knew I was an alcoholic until I was 50 or something. I thought nobody knowed or cared, and and I just every night I'd have beer and wine, after work, and I'm home, and I'd never drink at work, but I don't know what got into me, and it just got a little worse for many. So around 2012 or no, before that, I started going to AA meetings and everything, and I thought that's a joke. And I think it all got into me, and I opened that Webster Place thinking that would make up for my failure, you know, as guilt wrap thing. That was good. And that was a recovery place. It's still going good, but I couldn't run it right. So I sold it to Easter Seals. And so around 2012, between AA and my partner, I just started saying, I'm going downhill, but nobody knows it. And somebody in Plymouth said, don't kid yourself. Every person in Plymouth knows you're a drunk. And it was like stabbing me in the heart. That helped a lot, I'll tell you. So it's been 8.5 years of sobriety, and in the 8.5 years, I've come back to a real person. I don't know what it was like before. I don't remember much. A few accidents, a few nice policemen that would drive me home, you know, just all kinds of problems. And now I try to help myself and if I can. I try to help others because that's the way it works for AA.
Well, you've done a wonderful job. It's been an amazing transformation. Having been part of two semi-successful interventions, one of the people at the intervention was Walt Mayshark, a 90-year-old woman. Remember, Walt came and told us all that she loved you and she wanted to support you and all of that. And it ends up that you get invited to Vice President Biden's Christmas party, and you took Walt as a special guest.
I date.
And called me from the vice president's house to tell me that the vice president had taken Walt into the private room for a 10-minute talk. What about that?
I called you from there?
Yes,
I called you from there? Oh,
from the Naval Observatory. Yes.
Yeah, that was a good story. That was a good story. Yep. We went. It was great. Well, Walter, I'm so bad. We took the subway and everything. Here she is, 92. I didn't even get a cab. You know, we slept in one bed, and she said, "People will talk. You know, people will talk." Oh God, it was fun.
She was a great friend. But you were also, let's go earlier, when Ashland was really being led into the future with people like Mary Rule and Kenny Forbes and others. You pitched in with the Common Man Ashland with pancake breakfast and taking part in the 4th of July parade. You've been really one of the Ashland's great supporters. Tell me about the bicycle ride. That's the one time I've ever seen you really fall on your face.
Oh, you did see me? Oh, well, it's just one of those big wheel bikes, and I ride it in a lot of parades. It's fun. This year we didn't have any parades, but we will again, and I'll be on it. It's fun. I did fall once in a while when the kid would run out on the road. There's no brakes on them.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. This was a year we missed a lot of parades. Plymouth, the pancake breakfast, the fireworks, but we'll be back. We'll be back. I'm glad you mentioned Mary Rule. She was a crackerjack. Her and the ladies that made the wooden bridge in in Ashland, fought the state and got a car, got old man, sorry, we'll pull his name and I won't. Arnold Grayton, except it's not Arnold, it's his father, but anyway.
Yeah,
they were
great.
Milton Grayton, yeah. But 4 ladies took on the DOT and built a wooden bridge rather than a $1 million wooden steel bridge, and more power to them. Of course, we had an grand opening picnic on the bridge, and that, I don't know how many years ago that was, probably 35, 40 years ago. That was great.
Now, you also got mixed up with Ben and Jerry. How did that happen? The ice cream makers.
Happened. We had a turkey fest, which was getting out the vote in 2008. It wasn't for Obama or it wasn't for anybody. It was to get out the vote. And it was Gary Hirschberg and Ben, one of the famous Tabasco family. I forget it, New Iberia, anyway. And we cooked a ton of turkeys. We made 3 events, one at Yogurt Place and had 350 people in this parking lot, one at the Audubon in Concord off of 89, and we had 350. And when we had it in the park by the community garden in Plymouth, we had over 600 people there. I don't know why Plymouth. We had 600 people, and we had no politicians talk. It was just a band from New Orleans, and we said, you gotta vote. You gotta get out and get people to vote, and we cooked these turkeys 5 at a time in the big tank I made. It was with a crank on it. It was Ben and Jerry, and they've been friends ever since. And we've had a lot of fun together. He's one of my idols. So are you.
Well, that was a wonderful thing. At a lower level, I want to thank you for helping me with some of my campaigns, providing the financial secretary to monitor the state's requirements, which was very helpful. But more important was the fact that you and I and others would stand out there by the driveway up to Walmart's on Tenny Mountain, and there was a red light there, so that all the truck, everybody had to stop. And I noticed that nobody knew who the hell I was, but they all knew you, and they would wave and cheer. And you probably should have bumped me aside and gone for it. But instead of talking politics, you wanted to educate me on what are the mechanics that make a big logging truck stop, start, and shift from low into, I don't know what, it goes to 8 or 16 gears.
Gearhead. I'm a gearhead.
Where did you ever learn about that, the gears?
It was all fake. I made it all up. I don't know. But I did want to say that you were in a parade, a 4th of July parade. Guess who you marched up the road with? Ashland.
Right?
John Lynch. Do you remember that? He was running for governor.
Well, I do remember John Lynch running for governor. As a matter of fact, on John's behalf, he was one of the few governors that ever came out of his office to just mingle with the lowly representatives, as opposed to the other governors. Greg would stay in the office. Mrs. Shaheen rarely came out until she thought she was in trouble. And John came out just to be a friend and get to know people. I was always impressed with that.
You walked that 4th of July with John. You supported him. You had signs and everything. And but you were right next to him. And I was, I don't know, standing there probably selling hot dogs or something. And I said, that guy's too short to be governor. I remember thinking it was a stupid thought. But we've been friends ever since. He's a #1 guy. He even helped us get that welcome center. He called me up and said, you ought to bid on that thing. I said, all the big boys, I can't go bid on that thing. And we won. Yeah. And he was a great guy. John is a great guy. We talk once a month on the phone. He's a gentleman, just like one of our new president.
Well, he's been a very helpful person all the way around.
You know, you mentioned our new president. He was up here once and speaking at the college. And after the college, I got this phone call in the morning, and guess who it was? John Lynch. And he said, Al, you know what? I hear Bowden, how do I say it? Biden, I'm losing it. Biden was going to be on what they call a unknown stop at the Tilton Diner. He said, I thought you'd like to know. And I said, oh, thank you very much for telling me. He said, nobody knows. I just wanted to call you. It's your diner. So 2 o'clock, he'll be there. He said, will you be there? I said, yep. So I got there and Biden hadn't shown up because he left the college late and everything. And John said to me, tell you what, people think I look like you and you look like me. I hear it all the time. He said, you be me and I'll be him when Biden gets out of the car. I said, gee, that's kind of funny. Let's try it. So it took him 10 minutes to get out of his limo or whatever it was. And I said, was he vice president? What the hell was he at the time? And I said, you know, hi, I'm Governor Lynch. And he looks at me and he looks at him. He said, no, you're the restaurant guy, aren't you? And we both laughed and all the guys, we were in the parking lot. But that's the day they came into the diner, sat there, had apple pie with Biden and Lynch and me over the counter with a MUR camera in our face. And he looked over to one of the those security guys, and he went like this. Is it out yet? Is it public? He went like that. And he reached over my head and he goes, is it okay? And he said, yeah. So he whispered to me, they just killed bin Laden. And it hadn't gone public, but he didn't hear it. He didn't know if it was out yet that he could talk about it. And that was a very memorable moment for me.
I think so. I think you've had many memorable moments, but I want to move to going back to your industrial chef and the way in which you've used that to go help those places that have suffered terrific damage. I want to talk about how and why and what you did in Katrina and how you do that, taking your skills and going down to places where they've had a devastating situation.
Well, let me tell. Early in my 71 year, you know, in 71, we had a guy up on the hill named Schofield who flipped over his tractor and broke his back. What was his first name? Anyway, Mr. Schofield. And so we had Schofield made at the restaurant. That was the first thing I ever did. And, you know, people came in and paid their $10 for dinner and I paid half of it back to them or something. I can't remember the numbers, but that was the beginning of a thought of, is don't advertise, just make people like you outside of your restaurant, you know, just do good things. And they call it the 360 circle. If you contribute your money back to your environment of people, and then that makes that service people happy and trust you. And if they're happy, then the customers are happy. And that's kind of, we call it the 360. If you have grumpy employees, you're not going to have very many customers. And if you have happy employees, hopefully they'll work out. And I feel good about that. I'm here to be proud of my business, not to make money. I just don't want to lose because we'll go out of business, especially the last year. It's been pretty ugly. But you asked about New Orleans.
Well, let's take New Orleans first.
I think that was the first big one I went to. And I drove, it was about 6 days after it hit. And New Orleans was only a flood. It wasn't the storm. The storm was up the lake. I mean, they lost some shingles and stuff and glass. But so I got there 6 days after the thing, driving one of our only common man van, a white van, drove it down. I had in it food, like the right things, rice and pasta and a mattress for me to sleep in, a bicycle, and a couple of pots and pans and stuff. And I drove down to try to get a job. On the way down, I was talking on the road, trying to find a job, and I couldn't find one. I got FEMA finally to take me to our warehouse. They were just standing doing nothing, and I said, well, I can't stay here. There's a lot of churches down there, and they're all making food for people that need it in New Orleans. So I followed them into this. I followed this truck into this place, and it was a big fairgrounds. Went down the road, and my car said, Common Man Restaurant. And I tried to. They had guns on them. There were all these National Guard people stopped me, like 10 of them, and they go, "You can't go in." I said, "Which way is the kitchen? I got food in here." Okay, it's right up at your right. So they didn't even ask another question. So I got in there, and there was these pup tents all over the place, maybe 75 pup tents, those little round things. And all I could hear was dogs barking. Well, I shouldn't have turned right. I should have turned left. It was the people saving all the dogs in New Orleans in a fairground that was closed. You know what I mean? So there was 1,000 dogs there. So I went up to the tents and said, "Do you have any food?" And they said, "No, we don't even have water or coffee." I said, "Well," they said, "there's a tent over there that dropped a lot of food out, but nobody's doing anything." I said, "Thank you very much." So we opened a stand, and the first thing I made was coffee in a big pot with an apron and a colander and port, and I called it Starbucks, and then my friend in Plymouth, Kathy Bentwood, showed up by airplane, and she helped, and we opened the stand and fed the people 4 to 6 days. And then the Red Cross finally got there and said, "We don't need you anymore." And I said, "Oh, geez, we're doing such a job. Maybe 400 people loved our food. We're making food every night, spaghetti, stuff." And they said, "Nope." And I said, "Well, do you think we can go into the city and save dogs like they are? They're all real vets, not just public people. They're all from Mexico and California." And they said yes. And so we went in the city with the van, but we get to the National Guard, wouldn't let us in. And they yelled at me. One guy pulled a gun on me because "No, it's okay. We're with the United States, what's it called? USPS, the United States Humane Society, USA." And I turned this thing around. And I said, no, we're going in. We got look at all the food in the back. And he goes, we had water and food. So we kept looking around the city till we found it. When the girl was the cop, she was a National Guard. And I said, "Do you have a dog?" She goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, we're in with the USHS and we're saving dogs." And she said, looked around and said, "Okay, go ahead." So we were in a city that looked like apocalypse, nothing around, not a thing. Go down the exits the wrong way, and there's shit all over the place, and trucks up on the curb, windows, broken and stuff. And they gave us a square to work in, and we got 22 dogs in houses, and I put a line on the back of the truck with a Sharpie. We didn't take them. We had to take the address down, give them water, give them food, and write it down. Then they'd go back and get them. And that was the idea. And that was in the kind of the slums of New Orleans, because the rich people took the dogs. The poor people thought they'd be back in a couple of days. So I remember from very sad dog stories. It was, I'd stand in the corner and like your daughter would go, "Ruff, ruff, ruff, ruff." And then I'd hear a bark somewhere, and we'd go to that house, break a window, throw in some food. And that was what we did. And we found 22 dogs, and they would go back the next day with the cages and stuff. So that was pretty good feeling. We're supposed to help the people, but I did go back 6 times because by being there, we raised $120,000 during the restaurants in that period, about 1.5 weeks, 120,000. So I went down 6 times after that, and I stuffed 60,000 in my pocket and went to churches and different places. And then I'd go back the next time and see them and give them, maybe $1,000 or $2,000, and some were more, to get tools for their houses and dry, what do they call it, sheetrock. And some were people, there was no damage in New Orleans. It was down on the deltas, what they call the Eastern Delta, where houses got flattened. And when I went down, I was smart enough to call the Louisiana restaurant organization, and they said, go see this guy. He's feeding people on Lake Pontchartrain. Go over and see him. I did. He said, come to my restaurant. We'll help you find places to bring food. So I met a bartender girl who lived on the Eastern Delta and had not yet been back to her house. I said, let's go down to the island. Can you drive? She said, we almost couldn't get in because her house was there. Her father was in a hospital and her mother was in an asylum. So she was, first time she'd seen her house, the only thing left was the tile on the kitchen floor. Everything was gone. It was, that Eastern Delta was just flattened. That's where all the oyster boats are. They got shipped out. We don't know how many people we lost that were Guatemalans and stuff. That was New Orleans in a nutshell.
Well, let's move to Puerto Rico. You also packed up and went there. How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, how did that happen? I called who? Oh, there's a guy, matter of fact, lives right across the Dearborn family. Tom Dearborn, I know, lived there. He said, yeah, you can stay at my house. So I went down, didn't know where to go to work, found a guy, and we opened 3 restaurants in downtown San Juan. No gas, no electricity, but we had running water. And no electricity in the restaurant with no, so we had to find gas. We opened, people loaned this guy the restaurants. He'd run around and find food, we'd make it. So we made about 700 meals a day in one restaurant, but we'd run between restaurants and borrow rice or potatoes or pork, or he'd go find them. And then we were there 2 weeks. And people would, volunteers from the island, local people would come in starting at 11:30 until about 2 and pick up these boxes of food and then to a village and them out. So I think the latter days of us staying there, we went on a trip to Alto, she's telling me the names, Toa Baja, got flooded up to the 2nd floor. And it had been quite a few days. It had been 15 or 20 days. All of their houses were in the road. I mean, not their houses, but everything that was in the house. And so we'd do that district, go house at a time and drop stuff off. They'd follow us. And I felt so good. Their houses were gone and there's still mud on the ground, but the water was like 12 or 13 feet deep. So it was on the 2nd floor. If it was a wooden house, it was gone. If it was a block house, it was okay. There were fire trucks trying to spray the walls down. And that was awful. The power was off in the whole island for a long time. That's about it. It was a mess, but we made food. That's all. Lots of food.
Well, most of us have seen you when you've been providing meals for many of our charitable interests, such as the Holderness Historical Society. But that's been for, cooking for 100 people. How do you cook for 700 people?
Well, first of all, we don't serve them. We cook in bulk. It's very simple, rice, chicken, and starch or whatever, vegetables. And the next day it would be maybe beans and rice and something else. And we just make big pots of it. And it was hot because there was no fans on. It was hard, but we felt so good every day. And we'd go home. Then we'd try to find food the next day. I didn't go on many food trips, but the boss guys did. And so that was Puerto Rico. It was interesting. But before that, we went to Haiti. Haiti was that terrible earthquake. They lost over 200,000 people. I still can't believe that number, when the whole town just flattens people. And I went down with the Dartmouth guys. There was 12 doctors and I was the lackey. What did we call it? I was the gopher. I would go to find wood or steel or water or lumber, all kinds of things. And I'd help. Good example, John Bentwood was one of the people who went, Kathy. First of all, when we got to Port-au-Prince, and landed there. We're supposed to go to the United States, what do they call them? United Nations people. And the lady said, you, and pointed to me, you're not a doctor, are you? I go, no, I'm just their gopher. She said, you can't go to the house we've saved. And I said, oh, that's okay, I'll find a place. And so they took them there in Jeeps. And I got one guy that spoke a little English, and he said, you can stay at my house. I said, okay, good. And that same night, I got a call on my phone because we had a free phone from the name of the electric phone company up here was Verizon. Gave us when we got to the border, it said, you guys are the border of the DR, Dominican Republic. A sign that said free phones for you guys, United States. And I had a camera from MUR. I was going to take movies and send them to him. So anyway, back to Bentwood. So he's fixing somebody, and I'm back at this temporary clinic that was there. And he said, go out and find a broom and bring it here. I need to break it in half and fix this girl's legs and put it between her two legs. That was good, because they were making casts for her. They had to unfix what they fixed before in an emergency. They were using saws, like saws, instead of no doctors. And it was a mess getting people under the buildings. They all pancaked. That was what I thought was the ugliest thing I'd ever seen. The smell was bad. You would see them pour diesel from a fire truck, diesel fuel on it, and light it because there was so many dead people. Like a 6-story building was only 10 or 12 feet high. And there were people in there, and they couldn't get them out. So they burned the whole thing. It's the only thing they could do. And that is about a sight to not see, I guess you call it. And that was that experience. The only one that was almost as bad was Abaco, and that was the most recent thing we went to. And that's the Bahamas, and that's the island of Abaco is one of the northernmost islands. The big ones like Nassau and Freeport didn't get hurt at all. They just got palm trees down and stuff. But Abaco was flattened. So I wanted to go there. I took a plane two times, landed in Nassau. That's the biggest city. Not having any idea where to go, but fumbled around, found a ship that was going to go to Abaco because that was where all the damage was. And he was going to leave at midnight, and it was 5 o'clock. And $50 he'd take me. And when do you get in? 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. I said, well, if anybody else comes along, take them because I might not be back. Went to the airport, and there was 50 guys that wanted to fly to Abaco with their own jets. They were all rich people coming in, and they wouldn't let them fly. So there's big arguments and fights and 50 people and all this. And I said, I can't do anything. And there's some people there that had these shirts on that said Central Kitchen. And I said, where are you guys from? And they said, oh, we're all one big organization called World Central Kitchen, WCK. And it's run by a guy named Jose Andreas. And I'd never heard of him in my life. He's a chef in California and New York. So I said, where are they? He said, oh, down in the Atlantis. So I got a cab, went to Atlantis, walked in at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. One guy in the kitchen, I said, any helpers? And the whole place is closed, of course. It's a big, you know that Atlantis, that pink one on TV, you see it, it's huge, 3,000 rooms. It was empty. Walked in the kitchen, which is as big as, it's pretty big. And the guy said, come back in the morning. And he said, by the way, you got to wear long pants. I said, I don't have any long pants. I just bought shorts. He said, well, show up here in the morning. We'll work on that. So I started just as a guy rolling cases of food to the tables, and people were making all this food and it was going. I didn't know anything. And by the 4th day, I was cooking. I organized an assembly on a woman to make sandwiches and got, that going, and then they give me another job. And finally, I was cooking big pots of food, and then we got to portioning it and putting in these big containers, and they would be flown out by helicopter to Abaco. I think they went twice a day, and they'd take all this big air helicopter could take and weight, and flew it out there and came back. So I don't know if I asked. By the time that started, my partner Lisa showed up probably a week after I was there, and she just did the same thing to me. She started on the line, putting tomato sandwiches together or something. And And they came to me and said, "You want to go to Abaco?" I said, "Of course I do." And so we were the only passengers on this plane a couple of days later with over 1,000 sandwiches, whatever the weight would take, packed in there. I got a film on it. It's funny. And landed there, and it wasn't funny. That island was flattened, just flattened. Probably 10%, 15% of the houses still stood. The rest were gone. The Haitians were there because they were running away from Haiti. They lived in a town. Guess what the name of the town was? Mud Town. Now, you know that Haitians lived obviously in the least desirable place. They all disappeared in the ocean. Nobody knew. They lived boat parks, and people would get out of their house and stand on the roof. And when the water came up to the roof, they would be swept away. So it was ugly. And we fed recovery people. There weren't very many locals there, just workers and stuff. Recovery, and there's something else they call it. There was nobody to be saved. It was too long, but they were clearing streets and bulldozers. And it was the ugliest thing I'd seen next to Haiti.
Well, Alex, you know, we build this program as how the common went to be uncommon, and your service in all of these situations is just remarkable. But you have one more uncommon thing when you, together with Rotary, brought some masks to this area for the prevention of COVID. What happened in that?
Remember when it was. Maybe Lisa can help me. I have no idea of time frames, but I got crazy and called I know what it was. I go to Honduras a lot. For 15 years, I've been going to Honduras. So I said, those ladies need a job. I'm going to have them make masks. So I called up the ladies down there and helped people speak Spanish. And I said, can you make masks? I'll give you 50 cents a piece if you make them. And they were happy as hell. And I figured they'd make, 100 or something. And I said, I'll pay for the materials and I'll give you 50 cents a piece. So how many did they make when it was all done? Yeah. So they made beautiful masks, 3 triple fold, all this with strings. And during that time, I found a factory and a guy, agent down there, that would take a factory that was closed, bring the people back and make us masks. So I bought 70,000 masks for $1 a piece. And he said we could have them in 8 days, landed in Miami. And here they are. This is what they look like. You see them around still. Let's see. Can you see that green mask? Very simple and stupid, but it works. And that was 70,000 masks. So I asked the road if they'd chip in a little bit, mostly Steve Rand and I. They came to Miami in pallets. We flew down at 7 o'clock in the morning, rented a van from Enterprise to get the pallets, found the place where they were, put them in the van, left at 11 a.m. to head back to New Hampshire. And we got to New Hampshire the next morning, driving straight at 10:30 in the morning. So it was a 24-hour drive, 11 o'clock till 11 o'clock, sort of straight. Of course, we stopped for coffee and gas all the way, we never stopped. And when we got to that downhill in Plymouth, we're going down the hill, and I look forward down the hill toward Plymouth, and there's roughly 8 black police cars parked in the median there, where there's usually a guy hiding. And I said, what the hell's that? I looked at Steve. I was driving. We're not speeding. I think they pulled out behind us. I said, I think this must be a drug truck from Lawrence, and they're all set up to surround it. That's what I really thought. He starts laughing, and one of the guys raises his hand and laughs out the window. What happened was the girls told the cops that we were coming up with these. So they escorted us into town with their sirens and drove around the common and into the inn. So that was a very nice ending for that trip. It was really funny and good. The end of that story. So in teen town, the first one was Plymouth, up at Restore. We were there from 10 to 2 one day, and 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. We gave away 8,000 masks. and we raised, is that true? And we raised $12,000. So they paid $1.50 for the free masks. You see what I mean? Because we asked for donations at the other end. So we said, we can do these in other towns. We did 19 towns in New Hampshire, drove there, stuff, not us, bring some signs and know-how, set up the lines and stuff. And we did it to 13 Rotary towns in New Hampshire, all the way from Lincoln to Claremont to Nashua, Manchester. I can't remember them all. I can't remember anymore. All over the place. Tilton, you know, everywhere. And they ended up earning $35,000 for the Rotaries in New Hampshire and gave away 60 of the 70,000. It was a wonderful, fun. Everyone we did, we'd stay for a first hour or something, get them going, you know, talking to them how to put it on, you know, and all that stuff. And it was just perfect. I drove those old buses down with a mask on them. We called Mask Up NH. That's what we call it. This is the newer mask, but that was the whole trip. And I'm very proud of it. And all the Rotaries just called us. We didn't call them. They called and said, we want to do it. We want to do it.
Well, Alex, let's talk about one or two things that you still have a great interest in. And one is barns. You are the barns expert of New Hampshire, having bought several and rebuilt some. Talk about getting the barn from Canterbury up here to the Italian farmhouse.
Well, that was a falling down barn on a potato farm. The name of the family was Pettingill, no, Peverly, the Peverly family. One guy's an auctioneer. That was an old potato farm. It had a scale in the barn. The barn was 96 feet long and 4 stories high. And the beautiful lady that lived in it worked at the Boscoan, not nursing home, but restaurant ladies' home. What do you call those places? In Boscoan, it's the woman's nursing home. And Art Harriman and me, we always go down once a year and play the guitar and sing. Come to the same way, all that stuff. And so I don't even remember where he's going.
She asked you to take down the barn for her.
So she tried all the big fancy barn people to take it down. They said no, they wouldn't, because it was little rotting and it was tipping over, dangerous. They didn't want to get, you know, if it's not structurally sound, how do you take it apart, or else it'll fall apart when you're not looking. So finally I went down one day and said, well, what are you doing with the barn? She said, I just have to get it out of here. The roof's gone and everything. I said, well, I'll take it down for nothing. So that summer of whatever year, it was about 5 years ago, we took it down. And every night I drive home with a load on a trailer. And we put it away for the winter. Every piece was labeled. And that first summer, the spring, they dug the foundation and we put the barn up. And now it's not 96 feet, it's 80 feet long and 40 feet wide. And it's not 4 stories high, but counting the basement, it's 3 stories high. And we did a lot of weddings for 1.5 years.
One of the earlier events was a celebration of Judge Bill Batchelor, which was a great success thanks to you. And we had Supreme Court Justice Souter came and gave a lovely speech.
Absolutely.
You've used your hobbies to help others, including some situations that your better angels have said you'll give it a chance. And some of them have worked out. Most of them have worked out. Some have failed. But your generosity has just been the most uncommon virtue. And
but again,
so I think
not generosity. It's not philanthropic. It was from my business head saying, you know, if you do the right thing, people will, even if the food sucks, they'll come to the restaurant. I have to make them serve the food right and cook it right. But if they like what they feel, they'll be back. And I think that we have employees that are faithful, like Marilyn, who's been with us 45 years as a waitress, and those kind of people. And I'm so proud of our company, but I'm getting on, and I'm not as good at running it anymore. So we're working on handing it over to the employees. It's going to take some time, but that's what we're doing. We're not selling it. We're going to.
You'll be happy to know that Kiplinger suggests in his most recent market evaluation that restaurants are going to have a strong comeback in 2021 and 22.
I'll keep on talking.
Yeah. Well, you keep on trucking, and we salute you as an almost uncommon gifted neighbor here in Holderness, New Hampshire. I'm signing off.
Okay, before we sign off, I want to thank you and your family. And I remember your dad, which would be Tyler's great grandfather, sitting at that round table from 69 forward. So that was a long time ago. I think Peter was 8 years old or something. I don't know. But your family is like that in this community. You've all done in the community, the greater family and the greater community. And thank you for that. You are I hate to say hero, my mentor. I like it the day you said, Alex, you may be a horse's ass, but I still love you, or something like that. Do you remember saying that? That's what you said, because no question I am. But I remember those things. I'll try not to be a horse's ass anymore.
Okay.
He says that to all of us. But I want to jump in here. You did employ four of the five of us. We've all had a stint in one of your restaurants, so I thank you for that. And I thank you for being with us tonight. And I feel so grateful that you are a resident of New Hampshire, and that all this good work is right in front of us, and makes me think I'd love to, in the throes of another kind of a Katrina, I'd like to figure out how we could go with you and support you. And so I hope we don't have another Katrina, but I'm putting my hand up to say I would be happy to go with you and support you.
We don't have to have a disaster, because I used to go 3 times a year, and that got a little heavy about 5 or 8 years ago, and I dropped down to once a year. But we can't go there now. Nobody will let you. But we go and we do work. We don't give money to them. We build a community. But
Honduras, yeah.
What did I say? Honduras, yeah.
Yeah.
This place called Euro, right smack in the mountains in the middle. That's where we go. You land in geez, I can't think of what's the city? She's helping me. And then we drive for 2.5 hours up into the base camp, we call it, and climb up in the woods to 2 villages that have no electricity, about 300 per village, and just teach them governance, agriculture, build schools, churches, water systems. Oh, and the health clinic, right? One person that lives in the village that does health. That's the only place we get money from. And the total budget's about 70 grand a year. And every go to the kids and stuff. They didn't even have a school when they started there 30 years. No school. The kids just didn't have a school. So then they have elementary school, which lets them go downtown to a boarding house we bought. And now 26 of them live in there because it's a 3-hour walk. So it's kind of hard to go to school.
Wow.
So
well,
we've seen now there's 20 university. That's the problem. 22 in the university, and they need money that they don't have. So we can't, that balloon can't keep, we got to figure something out. We did the right thing, but we can't do that. I know it's over. I'm sorry, but I go on forever. Sorry.
no, that's important work. I know Tyler came back with great.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for reminding me. All I do is pull wire, but he'd wire it, and stuff. And yeah.
You learned a lot for sure. Well, thank you very much. And thank you everybody for joining us. And you take care, Alex and Lisa back there.
I want to thank Sid again for being
Thanks,
Sid.
Sid.
So you're all welcome. We'll have another go soon.
Okay.
All right, thanks,
We'll
Al.
bring you. Good night, you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see.
Right, thank you.